There are obviously a lot of ways that social media makes us worse, but one of those ways that I think is under-discussed is the way in which it makes us status obsessed in a way that human beings are not meant to be. Now, of course, status matters. It has always mattered. There's usually been a chief, and there have been people with less power, and there have been people in between through all of human history. People that say things have ever been perfectly equal are probably wrong. But it's key to note that in ancient times, say medieval times or the Greco-Roman times or the general times that people lived in all around the world where there were kings and rulers and people lived in small towns, but it wasn't quite medieval. In all those situations, you had people with very little and people with a lot, and they were usually separate from each other. They actually didn't see that much of one another, right? The person that got to eat meat all the time and had amazing accessories and things, he didn't really go into the village all the time and flaunt his wealth, except, of course, in a ritual manner. And then again, it was one guy and he was perceived as the protector, the one who was playing an important role. And so his wealth glorified these people in their minds in many cases because they identified with him. They saw him as an extension of themselves. Not to say that this is good or I agree with this, but because of that, the status difference wasn't extremely painful. Not in the way status differences are now. Status differences hurt so much now because, first of all, we are constantly being bombarded with them. If we go on social media, we are essentially always entering the inside of the castle. Every day we are forcing ourselves to walk through the castle, sometimes literally, and see the homes and possessions and lives and girlfriends and boyfriends of extremely wealthy, high status people. And so the comparison between our lives and these lives is so stark and so obvious that it pretty much makes us mad all the time. We look at ourselves, we see, in this case, oh, we're missing teeth. Our skin is dark from working in the sun. And we compare that to these people, and we see a difference. And this difference plays out all over the world. I live in Asia, and in these most Asian countries, dark-skinned people are sadly looked down on simply because they're seen as living out of doors and living laborious jobs. But if you're constantly comparing through social media, you don't get to stay in one place. You don't get to appreciate your little status hierarchy or sort of flat status relationships in your village. That's even worse because the status relationships now are not stable. This person, no matter how jealous they were, probably knew that they were never going to become one of these people. It was very unlikely. Not to say that it never ever happened, but the average person wasn't tortured by the notion because it was so distant. Just like the idea that the fact that you're not winning the lottery doesn't torture you. It's so rare that you don't expect or feel entitled to something like that. You don't aspire to it or place your identity on the idea that you're going to win the lottery. You're content as a non-lottery winner. But we now live in a society where we can dream conceivably of moving up quite a lot. It is possible. So because of that, we see the difference. We see that there are conceivable actions that would close the difference, say working really hard or meeting the right people or whatever. And we see that we are not doing those actions. And so we have to tell ourselves a story about this status difference. That is not the story of, oh, he's a king that was chosen by God. Because if the higher status person is a king that was chosen by God, it doesn't hurt so much that he's higher status than you because it seems like he's higher status for a very good reason. But if we believe that is not for a very good reason, and that we somehow have not made it here through some fault of our own, well, that tension, that lack of self-esteem expresses itself as a need to tear these people down or else elevate ourselves above other people. And this is the really pernicious thing about social media, is we then start looking at whoever we can that is lower than us. So say we watch a TikTok about rich influencers driving Lambos. Well, then we need to balance that out by watching videos of illiterate people in other countries doing things that we think are disgusting or strange or unforgivable. And therefore, we now feel, well, we're in the middle. And a human being can live feeling like he's in the middle. Feeling middle is quite normal to us. Most people are, by definition, in the middle. But the issue is, by viewing social media, you're constantly putting yourself in a state of tension in regards to status. You're seeing something like this, and so you feel better, and you are aspiring to more, and then you see something like this, you realize you're not this, you're probably not going to have this, or you're not capable of the actions that would lead to this, for better or for worse. And so then you need to watch people that are lower than you, yet again, to make yourself feel like you're in the middle. Do you see any end to this process? Do you see any way in which this runs its course and you're at peace? People say that that happens as they get older, but we don't really know what happens when people do this all their lives from the time that they're teenagers and then keep doing it until they're old. Will they get over the status anxiety? I'm inclined to think no. Because what do we see now in the young generations that are engaged in this process of status anxiety at all times? What do they become obsessed with? They become obsessed with changing their looks, using plastic surgery to try to get into the castle. Just stick with the metaphor. They get obsessed with social revolutions, right? Of radical changes that will tear down the order with no regard to what might come after. They don't even think about the idea that the new order might be worse. They, of course, conceive of themselves as somehow elevated in the new order, and that makes them feel better. And so they live in the myth of the establishment of a new and radical order, or they live in the myth of personal transformation through plastic surgery or through radical self-help, right? I'd say the healthiest expression of this status anxiety is in people that say, I need to change myself, I need to become better, I need to work harder. But even that can go too far. Some people who are plainly not meant to be billionaires, who are not meant to be Silicon Valley geniuses, they push themselves into that life because they can't stand the status anxiety, and they hurt themselves. They give themselves burnout. They give themselves ulcers. They probably get disease earlier than they would have otherwise because their body is being pushed into doing something that it can't handle, that it is expending too much energy to try to aim towards. So you get lost in status anxiety, and it makes you do things that you otherwise would not have done. It makes you unhappy, and worst of all, it keeps you addicted to the process of feeling status anxiety itself. Once you start watching videos about these kinds of things, it's very hard to stop. And it may be that a small dose of these videos helps you to change your life. It helps you to want more. But it helps you to change your life in what way? In what way does getting a Lambo necessarily imply personal development? Do we see that people that drive Lambos are better than other people? Smarter, friendlier, wiser, kinder, better for their community? Not necessarily, right? Some of them are probably good. Obviously not all. So be very careful, even if you are taking from these videos that you should make your life better, the conclusions you're deriving, what you're thinking about as better. But most of all, you need to disengage from this process entirely. Shoot not for status, not for the relieving of status anxiety, but actual outcomes, actual creations. Think not of, I'm going to be so famous, but I'm going to make a great song that brings tears to people's eyes. Not, I'm going to be loved, but I'm going to do things, the kind of things that naturally help other people, and love comes as a result. But you can never think like that if status anxiety from social media has you in its grip, because it's not going to let go easily. It's not going to let you magically just switch to being kind and moving from a place of authenticity and like intuitive desire to help other people. Those things can't coexist. You have to get rid of the status anxiety. And I hope you do.